A lot of you have been asking for part 2 of the clown stories, so I figured with all this clown madness still going on, there's no better time to share one more. Just 3 days ago, I had my own run-in with one of those clowns everyone's been talking about lately. Most people see them from the safety of their cars, catching glimpses on quiet roads before driving off. But me, I wasn't that lucky. My encounter was much more unsettling. I live out in Massachusetts, tucked away on a property surrounded by thick trees. A long, winding driveway snakes its way down to the road, cutting through the dense green like a hidden path. It was during the day when it happened. I was out by the entrance, trimming down a drooping branch that had started leaning too close to the drive. That's when I first saw him. A clown, or, well, a guy dressed as a clown, but the distinction didn't matter much in that moment. He was walking slowly down the side of the empty road, each step deliberate, almost dragging. Then he stopped, right at the mouth of my driveway, like he had picked that exact spot for a reason. I stood there, clutching the branch cutter, watching as he gradually, almost painfully, turned his head toward me. His body stayed facing the road, stiff, while his head twisted slowly until the pale, painted mask was looking directly at me. I'll give him credit. The costume was disturbingly good. The mask, something straight out of a low-budget horror movie that leaves you unsettled long after the credits roll. The red around the eyes, the way the mouth seemed stuck in a too wide grin. It was all just a little too real under the daylight. I let out a quiet chuckle, more out of disbelief than amusement, and managed a small smile in his direction. Honestly, with everything I'd heard about people's encounters with these clowns, I half expected him to start charging at me, to let out some crazed laugh and sprint up my driveway to get a reaction. But he didn't. He just stood there, head turned, holding me in his hollow gaze for a moment that felt much longer than it probably was. Then, just as slowly, he turned his head back toward the road, shifting the dead, painted eyes away from me, and resumed walking, each step heavy and unhurried. I could have said something. Part of me wanted to shout out, to demand what he was doing standing at the end of my driveway like that. But I didn't. Maybe I was too curious, or maybe I just didn't care enough in that moment, telling myself it was probably some kid messing around for TikTok or a Halloween prank coming early. But as I watched him disappear down the empty road, the silence pressing in around the trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have cared a lot more. That night, I went about my usual routine, locking up the shed out back, making sure every latch was secure before heading inside. I shut off all the outdoor lights, letting the darkness settle around the house, pressing up against the windows like something alive. Once I was back in the warmth of the kitchen, I started getting dinner ready, trying to shake off the weird feeling from earlier. Then, I thought I heard something outside. It was faint, just barely over the quiet hum of the house, like a soft crunch or a shuffle in the yard. I walked over and pushed the kitchen window open a little wider, letting the cold breeze slip in. All I could hear was the wind pushing through the trees, the leaves rustling like whispers just out of earshot. I listened for a moment longer, trying to catch anything else, but there was nothing, just the wind and that empty, uneasy quiet. I shut the window completely, locking it, and turned back to the counter, trying to focus on the food in front of me. That's when it happened. A heavy, aggressive knock slammed against the window I had just closed, loud enough to shake the glass in its frame. It wasn't a normal knock. It was the kind of pounding that you feel in your bones, each thud vibrating through the air and settling deep in your chest. My whole body jolted back, a surge of panic flooding through me so hard that I felt it in every limb, my legs going weak while my heart hammered in my chest, double its usual pace, like it was trying to escape. I grabbed the knife sitting on the counter, clutching it so tightly my knuckles went white, and forced myself to turn back to the window. I needed to look, needed to see what was out there. But all I could see was the reflection of my own pale, terrified face staring back at me in the dark glass. Outside, it was nothing but black, the night pressing against the window like a thick, heavy curtain. I stood there, frozen, fighting to summon the courage to do what I knew I needed to do. I needed to see. I needed to know. So, gripping the knife tighter, I walked over to the back sliding glass door, the one that led out to the patio. My hand hovered under the light switch, the plastic cold against my skin, my finger trembling as I hesitated. I counted in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, waiting, hoping the darkness would stay quiet. Then, I flicked the switch. The patio light clicked on, spilling harsh yellow light across the concrete and the small patch of grass beyond. But before I could even step outside, the horror I was afraid of came too early. Because standing there, right on the other side of the sliding glass door, was the same clown from earlier. He was closer now, much closer, the mask just inches from the glass, its colors washed out under the porch light, making the red paint look like smeared rust and the white like old bone. His head was tilted to the side, like a dog trying to understand something it couldn't, the frozen smile on the mask somehow looking even uglier this close. And he was staring straight at me. I could have, hell, I probably should have, opened that door right then and there, knife in hand, ready to stab the guy, or at least scream at him, threaten him, do something. But it's always easy to think about what you should have done when you're looking back. In that moment, all I could do was run. I bolted upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time, gripping the knife so hard I could feel the handle cutting into my palm, my breathing ragged as I burst into my bedroom and grabbed the telephone with shaking hands to call the police. Downstairs, I could hear it. The pounding. Even through the closed door of my room, the heavy glass of the sliding door downstairs shook under the force of each hit, echoing up the staircase like a drumbeat that wouldn't stop. It was getting worse, too. Before, it had been slow, deliberate knocking, taunting me, testing me. Now, it was a frenzy. The clown was pounding with both fists, over and over, each thud rattling the glass, the frame, the house, and the thin sense of safety I was clinging to. Then, the screaming started. It wasn't a normal scream. It was the kind of screaming that comes from deep inside a person, the sound of something broken, like a lunatic screaming in the halls of an asylum, raw and guttural, rising above the pounding fists, making every hair on my body stand on end. I felt like I was going to die. Each minute that passed, waiting for the cops to arrive, stretched out painfully. Each second, heavy and loud, filled with the clown's screams and the violent pounding on the glass. Each hit making me flinch, as if he was already inside, as if the next one would finally shatter the door and let him in. And then, suddenly, it stopped. The pounding and the screaming cut off, replaced by a different voice, a voice I recognized, shouting outside. "What the hell you doing? Get the fuck out of here!" I ran to the window and pulled the curtain aside just in time to see Marv, my neighbor, striding across the yard with a rifle in his hands, the barrel angled down but ready. His eyes were locked on the clown, who was backing away from the patio, that grotesque mask still facing the house as he took a few slow steps before turning and bolting into the woods, disappearing into the darkness without a sound. I ran outside, the cold air slapping me in the face, the knife still in my hand as I met Marv at the edge of the patio. I tried to thank him, the words tumbling out of me in a rush, but he just nodded, his eyes scanning the tree line, the rifle still in his grip. "Clown ran off into the woods," he told me, his voice low, steady, but there was a tension in the way he stood, like he was ready for him to come back at any second. The cops pulled up shortly after that, lights flashing, cutting across the dark yard. They took down my description, asked a few quick questions, then did a fast 5-minute sweep around the property before leaving, the red and blue lights flickering against the trees before disappearing down the driveway. Marv didn't let me go back to my house that night. He insisted I crash at his place, just in case, and I didn't argue. Around here, we don't mess around when it comes to our safety, and we sure as hell don't play games with something like this. So yeah, at the time I'm telling you this, it's only been 3 days since it happened, right in the middle of all this clown madness going around. And I'm still trying to convince myself it's over. There was this Instagram account that popped up out of nowhere, supposedly run by clowns, threatening they were going to show up at my school. Everyone took it seriously, too. The police were called in, and even the SWAT team showed up, parking outside with their lights flashing, heavy gear glinting in the sun. The time the clowns claimed they would come was around 11 a.m., so as the clock inched closer, you could feel the tension in the halls. Everyone was on edge, voices low, eyes darting toward the windows with every passing minute. But me, along with a couple of my friends, I figured it was probably just some fake account made by some idiot looking for attention, a prank that got out of hand. I didn't think it would actually happen. I mean, I'd even heard some story floating around that someone saw a clown down by the local pool chasing a kid I knew from class. I didn't buy it, though. It all felt like another overblown rumor. But then 11:15 rolled around. That was when the voice of our vice principal cracked over the loudspeaker, and it didn't sound like it usually did. His voice was tight, shaking just enough to set off a chill in my stomach. "We are now going into lockdown. Please shut the doors and lock the windows." I felt my pulse pick up, a cold wave sliding through my chest as I looked around at my classmates, trying to keep it together. Everyone started moving, the scrape of chairs loud in the silence, the thud of the door shutting sharper than usual. We all huddled into the corner of the room, crammed together, our backs pressed against the cold wall, out of sight from the door, just like we had practiced during drills. But this didn't feel like a drill. No one spoke. No one dared move. We just waited there, the only sounds the ticking of the clock on the wall and the muffled hum of the building around us. Every little noise suddenly too loud, too sharp. We stayed there for an hour and a half of silence so heavy it pressed down on your chest, every second stretching out until it felt like it would snap. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that we'd get the all clear soon, But the longer we sat there, the more I felt that cold knot in my stomach tightening. Finally, the intercom crackled again, and the vice principal's voice came back, sounding tired, worn. "We are free to go home since it is the end of the day." I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding, a wave of relief washing over me so fast it made me dizzy. We gathered our stuff, moving slowly, cautiously, like the air might shatter if we made too much noise. When I stepped outside, the cool air hit me, and it felt like I was waking up from something. The parking lot was still filled with police cars and the SWAT van, officers standing around, talking in low voices, but no one stopped me as I started the walk home. My house was about a mile from the school, so it was a 20-minute walk, give or take. I slid my earbuds in about a minute into the walk, trying to drown out the leftover tension buzzing in my head, trying to feel normal again after a day that had been anything but. On the walk home, there's this stretch where I have to pass by a couple strips of forest, patches of trees pressed close to the road, the branches hanging low, shadows layered on shadows. Normally, I don't think twice about it, but today, of all days, it got under my skin. Every rustle of leaves made me glance over my shoulder. Every gust of wind made me tighten my grip on my bag. I tried to tell myself not to let it get to me, that it was just another walk home, that nothing was going to happen. About 5 minutes into the walk, I was passing one of those stretches of forest when something caught my eye. Bright colors flashing between the trees. My heart jumped, but I forced myself to look away, shaking my head, telling myself it was nothing, that my mind was just playing tricks on me after everything that had happened today. But then I looked back, and it was there, standing half hidden among the trees, wearing baggy pants that were white with yellow polka dots, but the fabric was ripped, hanging in dirty shreds around the legs. The top was the same, a yellow button-up kind of shirt, but it was torn in places, stained with mud, hanging loosely off thin shoulders. The mask it wore was cracked, the paint smeared, with tufts of red hair sticking out in messy clumps around the sides, tangled and dirty. Its head was tilted to the side, just slightly, like it was studying me, and it was completely still. Its eyes hidden behind the mask, but I could feel it watching me, pressing against me even from a distance. Then it started to laugh. A loud, hysterical laugh that rose up in the quiet air, echoing off the trees, too loud, too sharp, rattling down my spine like a cold spike of fear. And then it started running, straight at me. I screamed, the sound tearing out of me before I could stop it, my bag slipping off my shoulder and hitting the pavement as I turned and ran, sprinting back the way I came, feet pounding the sidewalk, lungs burning with every breath. I didn't stop until I saw the school, the building looming up in front of me like a lifeline. I found a police officer standing near the entrance, and I ran up to him, out of breath, the words spilling out of me in a panicked rush as I told him what I had seen. He cursed under his breath, his jaw tightening, and within seconds, he and a bunch of the other officers jumped into their cars, slamming the doors, lights flashing as they sped off down the road toward where I had come from. Truthfully, I don't know if they caught the clown or not. Part of me would like to believe they did, that they found him and took him away, but deep down, I'm not so sure. Rumors started floating around school later that a clown had actually walked right up to the front door, standing there, threatening to come inside. I didn't see it myself, so I can't say for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was the same clown I saw, standing in those woods, waiting. The police went on a manhunt around the area I told them about, searching the woods, but from what I heard, the clown was likely gone, melted back into the shadows between the trees, hiding, waiting. That means He's still out there, free to scare and terrorize whoever he wants. Just another one of the many clowns roaming around, waiting for the next person to walk by alone. Friday night, October 7th, 2016. It's about 1 in the morning, and I'm walking home from my friend's place, a little buzzed, the warmth of cheap beer still buzzing in my veins. He lives almost a mile away, and the streets are empty, quiet in that heavy way only late-night neighborhoods can be. I stop when I reach the T intersection where two roads meet, the asphalt slick under the glow of a distant streetlight. Just beyond, there's a trail that cuts through the woods, a shortcut I've taken 100 times during the day. A narrow path where the trees close in overhead, branches forming a dark tunnel over the dirt. There's no light back there, nothing but the thick dark pressing in, swallowing the trail whole. And I'll admit, even during the day, there's something about that path that creeps me out. At night, it's worse. The shadows feel alive, shifting at the edges of your vision, and every little sound is amplified, echoing in your head long after it stops. Still, I figured I'd save myself a good 10 minutes if I cut through instead of taking the long, winding roads back to my place. The roads in my neighborhood twist and curve like they were laid down at random, snaking through the woods and around hills, making a walk that should be short feel twice as long. So I went for it. I pulled out my phone, turning on the flashlight, the thin beam cutting a pale path through the dark as I stepped into the woods. The air felt colder under the trees, damp and heavy, the ground soft under my shoes as I started to pick my way down the trail. The only reason this path was quicker was because it cut straight toward my house, slicing through the curves and loops of the streets like a hidden road only I knew. About 50 yards in, I heard something. Noises coming from up ahead. It sounded like voices, low and muffled, more than one person talking, shifting around in the dark. Normally, that wouldn't be too weird, especially on a Friday night. Sometimes kids from around the neighborhood would come into the woods to smoke or drink, using the darkness to hide from nosy neighbors. But still, with all the clown stories going around, especially in my area, my mind jumped straight to the worst possibilities. People were seeing clowns everywhere, lurking in the dark, standing on street corners, showing up in places they shouldn't. And the thought of running into one out here, alone, in the dark, hit me with a cold wave of fear that settled deep in my stomach. I kept walking, the beam of my phone light shaking just a little as I tightened my grip, my ears straining to catch the sounds ahead, each step feeling heavier as I moved deeper into the dark, every rustle in the underbrush sounding too close, too sharp, like something waiting just out of the light. I quickly covered the light from my phone with my hand, fumbling to turn it off, the screen glow slipping through my fingers for a moment before the darkness swallowed it completely. I tiptoed around the trunk of a big tree, pressing my back against the rough bark, trying to steady my breathing as I listened. The sounds were getting closer. Footsteps. Each step crackled over the dead leaves on the trail, slow and deliberate, just like I had feared in the back of my mind. I knew the odds of actually running into clowns in these woods were almost nothing, but still, after everything that had been going around, the thought had been lingering, and the last thing I wanted was to run into anyone out here at this hour. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing, hoping they hadn't seen the light from my phone. The footsteps came closer, growing louder as they crunched over the leaves. the sound sharp in the cold air, echoing between the trees like it was chasing me. Then they stopped, right where I was standing. A painful, heavy feeling dropped into my chest and sank into my stomach. That cold wave you get when something shocking happens, making your whole body tense up. The silence pressing in around me so tightly that it felt like it was pushing me into the tree. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else. The forest suddenly too quiet. The darkness so thick it felt like it was moving around me. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Slowly, carefully, I leaned forward, daring to stick my head around the tree, squinting into the darkness. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, but then I saw them. Two figures standing there, just a few feet away, barely illuminated by the faint sliver of moonlight breaking through the branches. They weren't moving, just standing there. And then I saw what they were wearing. My breath caught in my throat, the blood pounding in my ears as I stared at the bizarre shapes of their clothes. Even in the dark, I could see the oversized, sagging fabric, the weird lumps of color, the way their heads looked too large for their bodies. They were clowns. Two of them, standing there in the middle of the trail, in the middle of the woods, at 1 in the morning, dressed in full clown suits, staring into the dark. It didn't feel real. For a moment, I actually wondered if I was dreaming, because this was exactly the kind of scenario I had imagined playing out in these woods, the kind of thing that had lurked in the back of my mind whenever I took this path at night. And now it was happening. They knew I was there. I was sure of it. They must have seen the glow of my phone when I turned it off, and that's why they had stopped, why they were just standing there in silence, waiting. The only question was what they were going to do to me now that they knew I was hiding, alone, in the dark. It was the most tense moment of my life. I stood there, frozen behind the tree, every muscle locked up, my breath caught in my throat, the cold air burning in my lungs as I waited, listening to the silence pressing in so heavily it felt like it would crush me. But it only lasted maybe 20 seconds. Then I heard it, the soft, deliberate crunch of leaves as the two clowns started walking again, their footsteps moving away down the trail, each step fading a little more into the distance. I waited, counting in my head, making sure they were really gone, until I couldn't hear them anymore. Then I moved. I didn't care how much noise I made. I jumped up, my shoes slamming against the dirt, branches snapping and leaves crunching as I ran, tearing through the trail, the beam of moonlight flashing across the path as I broke out of the trees, my breath ragged and loud in the cold night air. My house was right across the street from the woods. As soon as I made it across, stumbling onto the pavement, I felt that rush of shaky relief flood through me, my eyes locking onto the dark shape of my house, just a few steps away, a safe place waiting for me. The lights were off inside. My mom was already asleep by then, the house quiet and still as I slipped around to the back, reaching for the secret key we kept hidden under a loose brick by the steps. My fingers fumbled with it, cold and trembling, but I managed to get the door unlocked. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me and locking it immediately, turning the bolt with a sharp click that echoed in the kitchen. I shut the blinds without even thinking, cutting off the dark outside, trying to push the night away, to seal it out. I walked into the living room, about to shut those blinds too, when I saw them. Across the street, standing at the edge of the woods, were the clowns. They were just there, standing side by side, facing my house, their oversized shapes half hidden by the shadows of the trees, lit only by the dim glow of a streetlight down the road. I couldn't tell if they were actually staring at me through the window, but they were so still, so silent, like statues placed there to watch. I was sure they were trying to scare me, to let me know they knew where I lived, that they weren't done. A cold dread crawled down my spine as I backed away from the window, turning and rushing down the hallway to my mom's room. I shook her awake, my voice breaking as I told her what I saw, how they were out there, just standing, watching. She got up, pulling on a robe, muttering to herself as she walked to the front of the house, pulling the curtain back to look outside. But just like in every horror movie, when she looked, they were gone. No sign of them, nothing but the empty street and the dark line of the woods, silent and still, like nothing had happened. Which meant I was the only one who actually saw them. I tried to go to sleep. Honestly, the fact that I was still a little buzzed helped, the warmth dulling the sharp edges of my fear just enough to let me crawl under the covers and shut my eyes for a while. I turned to face the wall, pulling the blanket up over my shoulder, trying to focus on the hum of the house, the quiet creaks of the wood settling, anything but the memory of those clowns standing across the street. But after a while, I got uncomfortable. I flipped over, turning to the other side, now facing the open space of my room. I could see everything from this angle. The dresser against the far wall, the faint glow of the digital clock on my nightstand, the curtain over the window shifting slightly with the draft. Even though I was tired, my eyes wouldn't stay closed for long. Every time I shut them, I saw those clowns again, standing in the dark, their heads tilted just slightly, waiting, watching. I couldn't stop thinking about them. The image burned into my mind so vividly that it felt like they were still out there, standing under the trees, looking up at my window. What if they were? The thought clawed at me, restless and insistent, a cold curiosity crawling up my spine, pushing at me until I almost couldn't stand it. Part of me wanted to get up, to walk over to the window and pull the curtain aside, to see for myself if they were still there. And then I heard it, a thud against the window. It was soft but heavy, the sound dull and final, like the sound of death tapping against the glass. The air left my lungs in a sharp, silent gasp, and I knew exactly what it was without even looking. I didn't move. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing my breathing to stay steady, pretending to be asleep, hoping that if I didn't move, if I didn't acknowledge it, it would just go away. Another thud. And another, each one louder, more forceful, the glass rattling in the frame with each hit, the sound tearing through the silence of my room like a blade. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it from outside, the fear rising so sharply that I felt it in every inch of my body, frozen under the covers. The thuds were getting more intense, closer together, each one shaking the window, and I was terrified that at any moment the glass would shatter, that they would break through, that the clowns would be there, climbing through the window, reaching for me. And all I could do was lie there, eyes shut tight, pretending to sleep, hoping they would stop. I couldn't take it anymore. The pounding on the glass, the fear clawing at the edges of my sanity. I finally forced myself to look. I lifted my head just enough to see the window, squinting into the dark, and through the small section under the blinds, the part that wasn't blocked, I saw him. A clown. His head was tilted to the side, the painted grin stretched unnaturally under the cheap plastic mask. The hollow eye holes pointed directly at me as I lay there in my bed, frozen, the blanket pulled up to my chest like it could protect me. That was all it took. The fear shattered whatever calm I had left, and I broke down, screaming, the sound ripping out of me, echoing through the house as I jumped out of bed and ran, stumbling down the hallway, tears streaming down my face as I burst into my mom's room, crying like a little kid, gasping out the words between sobs. "There's a clown outside my window!" My mom didn't brush it off. She didn't roll her eyes or give me some tired, cliched line about me just seeing things or blaming it on the fact that I'd had a few drinks earlier. No, she took me seriously because she's my mom and she could see how shaken I was. Without a word, she reached under her bed, pulling out the pepper spray she kept hidden there, her face set, her jaw tight. She marched down the hallway, her footsteps firm, and went straight to my bedroom window, yanking the blinds up to confront whatever was out there. But just like before, the clown was gone. The yard was empty, the night still, the only movement the sway of branches in the breeze, like nothing had ever been there. But my mom believed me. Of course she did. She's my mom. And the next day, she even called the cops, reporting that there were clowns in the area, that they were harassing us, that they were coming up to our windows in the middle of the night. She didn't care if it sounded crazy, because she believed me, and she wanted it to stop. But that wasn't the end of it. Last night, it happened again. I looked out the window, and there he was. A clown, standing across the street by the edge of the woods, in the exact same spot as before, facing my house. Just standing there, still as a statue, staring. Even now, I still feel sick when I think about it, paranoid. Every sound outside makes me jump. Every shadow across the window makes my stomach twist. The fear never really leaving, even in the daylight. But I'm done just waiting. Next time, I'm getting proof. Next time it happens, I'm going to get a picture or a video, something to show everyone that this is real, that it's all real.